Hi everybody, I'm Josh Constine from TechCrunch, and today I'm here with Tim Dodd from Neustar Media, developers of the technology behind the new digital rights management system, Ultraviolet. Hi, thanks for coming in.
Hey, sure. Thanks for having me.
So maybe you could tell me a little bit about what Ultraviolet is, just to start.
Sure. So Ultraviolet is a cloud-based digital distribution format. So it's about distributing content from the cloud using today's existing DRM technology. So we're not actually kind of creating a new DRM system, not doing anything, in addition or different from what's out there today. But what we are doing, which is really cool, is actually making the current DRM systems that don't talk to each other actually interoperate. So everyone who kind of today, buys content digitally is somewhat locked into different silos. You've got to buy like a PlayStation version or a Microsoft version or for your Xbox, or maybe a different version for users Adobe. That's all great, but with Ultraviolet, we're actually combining all these things so they work together, so they actually interoperate. So Ultraviolet's not really a new DRM; it's a new way of handling existing DRMs. So they actually talk together and provide consumers, what they need to do, like ultimate choice, confidence, and freedom. So you can buy one place and use somewhere else.
Great. So which devices does Ultraviolet work on right now?
So right now we're looking at it's still we just started the service in October with the launch of some titles from Warner Brothers, and then we have more titles coming from Sony and NBCU in the next week or two. So right now it's really working on a whole bunch of different devices that are tied to different types of services. So the current Warner Brothers implementation uses a service called Flixster, and that service uses PC, Mac, Android, and iPad, both streaming, and now with their latest release, they upgraded the system to support download as well to iOS devices like an iPhone and an iPad. So it's a bunch of different types of devices, and then as we roll out, it'll be moving to connected TV sets, to other things as well, game consoles. They're all part of the overall structure here. But the initial launch has been really about the PC, Mac, and then the tablet world.
So it sounds like you guys have Apple on board now?
They're not a member, but in terms of, so there's kind of two ways of looking at it. In terms of the application sets, yeah, absolutely, they approve the Flixster application, and that application does download and does streaming. So that actually works very well with the iPad and other iOS devices as well. In terms of iTunes, they haven't. Currently, the Fairplay DRM is not part of the DRMs that are part of Ultraviolet. It'd be great if it was. It's currently not, but we are still talking to those devices through these different applications and all these other kind of Ultraviolet approved apps that we're running. So, kind of a different way of looking at it, but essentially, yeah, it talks to those Apple devices.
What about Amazon? Are they going to be supporting Ultraviolet?
There's still a number of retailers who are in lots of discussions with studios. I probably can't talk about that, but there are ongoing discussions with all the retailers, Amazon, Walmart, Best Buy, all the kind of usual suspects who sell lots of digital media or physical media with digital benefits. So yeah, we're still talking to all those companies, and I think you'll see some pretty engaging discussions going into the next quarter. So
let's get real. I mean, without Amazon or iTunes right now supporting Ultraviolet, is this something that users are really going to want? Like, is it ubiquitous enough for it to really work?
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool, right? So there's a bunch of different things that are interesting here. So for instance, it's really the first time studios have moved beyond the format that they sell the disc into a different format. So today, we're shipping Ultraviolet discs that are stamped with Harry Potter, stamped with Green Lantern, whatever, but those are UV rights that are associated with those discs, and that's a studio-approved way of doing things, which really benefits consumers. And then beyond that, to kind of get into the streaming side of it, it's really going beyond just the home or beyond the device or the Blu-ray player. It's now talking kind of anywhere, to any iPad, wherever you have it in the country, right, or in the world. So that's actually very interesting, new consumer behavior, new studio behavior as well. And so, yeah, I think initially, the launch is really driven by some of the studios. You see Flixster out there, and you'll see other studios on board very soon. But I think there is strong interest from the retailers. And as that takes off, and as we see that happening, I think we're going to see a very large, broad system of things developing. So, I think it's early days yet, but all indications that we're seeing are very positive. there's been some consumer behavior that people are, iTunes versus things, but I think overall it's been very, very well received.
What about Disney? I've heard that they're not on board in terms of providing content through UV.
Yeah, Disney currently aren't a member. I know people are still talking to Disney a lot. Obviously, it'd be great if they joined up. But we have the 5 major studios. We also have, Lionsgate are a member. BBC Worldwide Entertainment just joined as well. So there's a number of overseas content providers and studios that are now looking at this from other angles as well. So I think overall we've got a very, very large group of people who are actually looking at licensing content and getting into this whole ecosystem.
Sure. And now the model allows people to buy DVDs and then be able to watch the content elsewhere.
Yeah.
That's sort of predicated on the idea that people want to buy DVDs, which we're seeing the sales of those falling. And I don't think that that's just because they can't play them elsewhere. I think people just don't really want discs. I mean, that's why Netflix is moving its business model away from there.
Right.
Is the eventual death of the disc-based media, is that going to hurt UV, or how is UV prepared for that?
Well, I think we're a long way away from the death of physical media. Right? The numbers are going down somewhat. I think actually last quarter they spiked up a little bit, and I think that was driven by Blu-ray. So we're still seeing some action there. But I think overall people like streaming, and I think people like ownership. I think people like stuff that's in the cloud, and whether it's ownership or renting. I think it's still a little bit, too soon to call, right? Because I think Netflix is a great consumer-facing, application, but there hasn't been an application that's as easy to use as Netflix that actually endorses ownership. So, to look at that model, it's not quite apples and apples yet. So, I think with UV, the potential is there to create a really easy-to-use consumer-facing application that embraces and endorses ownership. And in the cloud, and streaming from the cloud, and that kind of stuff, the same way that Netflix does for rental. And that could be very, very cool, right? And so that's kind of the promise of Ultraviolet, is to kind of say, let's look at ownership in the cloud, and let's derive from that some kind of really interesting consumer use cases. And I think there's still a very vibrant opportunity here for people to kind of drive in to that market and say, look, let's actually embrace ownership. Because I think people like the cloud, they like streaming, I get it. And from my own personal, point of view, I like discs as well for collection. But I have I have 3 kids, and they tend to trash the discs. So it would be good to have stuff that's more available in the cloud as well.
Is that going to be a great use case for UV? Is that basically, if you destroy the physical media that you got when you purchase something, it's not like the end of you owning that piece of media itself?
I think, well, not if you destroy it, but I think, just overall, if you
break it, if you scratch it.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to use it in a different way, so if you want to take your existing physical collection and move it to the cloud, that's very, very cool. And that's something that I think people will really embrace. Yeah, and that's something that's possible through Ultraviolet, and it's not an upload. It's simply looking at the disc and saying, yeah, this is, name a movie, and then that goes up into the rights locker, and then you can get that from any of your devices. It's pretty much instantaneous. And we've actually developed the technology to do that, and it works very, very well.
So right now we've been talking mostly about movies, but is UV going to be used for any other types of media, such as music or books?
Yeah, so initially it's movies and then episodic TV. So Warner Brothers has announced they're launching a couple of TV episodes or series at the end of the year. But yeah, I look at what we're doing with Ultraviolet, and I think it really could work in a number of different ways. So I think books are really interesting. So is music. Games, I think, are huge. So the potential there to kind of derive all these different use cases and then say, okay, just apply them to different media types is definitely there. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for talking to me, Tim.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you.